For once, I don't think the title is hyperbole. I am in firm belief that Young Justice put to screen one of, if not the best, interpretations of Dick Grayson's version of Robin, especially during his early years. Not only is Dick shown to be incredibly smart, he's also shown to have a great sense of humor. He's shown that when things get tough, he needs to actually take something serious. He can do that. There's a range of emotion and depth to the character that some lack. I feel some interpretations of Dick Grayson, for example, Brave and the Bold, play a little bit too much into his easygoing, laughable, joking side. And adaptations such as Batman, The Batman 2004, don't really give too much substance to his character, nor even bother to show any of the darker elements that he might have, especially being a kid from trauma. And I think this show does that way better and shows a better depth of emotion and range to his character. Not to mention, he has some of my favorite TV show catchphrases of all time.
But did anyone see what he did wrong?
Oh, he hit on teacher and got served? Dude, clearly you're not feeling the Aster. The infiltrators have been outfiltrated.
I'm a little overwhelmed.
You're overwhelmed, Freeze was underwhelmed. Why isn't anyone ever just whelmed?
I have 100% found myself since watching this show using Aster and whelmed in my own personal life. And then of course, people look at me like I'm crazy. But getting back on topic, this show also finds time to delve into the idea of the weight that comes with taking up the mantle of being Batman, the weight of leadership on Dick Grayson, a character who has been fighting crime since he was 9 years old in this show's continuity and has been built up to take a leadership role at the ripe old age of 13. And they're able to jam in all of that depth to his character while also handling 5 other main protagonists, along with a ton of separate side characters the DC Universe has, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. To me, it really reminds me of how EMH was able to handle so many characters, except I never felt that anybody was thrown to the wayside in the main cast like Black Panther was. And with all of that squarely out of the way, it's about time that we delve into the first episode of the season, which is all about independence. You see, from the very offset that we see the character, Robin actually has the most independence, in my opinion, from any of his counterparts in the Young Justice squad. Because he works with Batman and because his role is so defined, he has a level of independence to himself that we don't necessarily see the other sidekicks get. For example, when he is fighting the Ice Villain of the Week, all of the other sidekicks are doing so directly alongside their partners, whereas Robin is almost seemingly by himself until Batman is there. So there's a level of independence he has, his other counterparts simply don't.
Great, but I'm kinda in a hurry here.
Kids, always in such a rush.
Not talking to you.
But it is also the same independence that acts as a double-edged sword later in this episode, and all throughout this season, because his role is so defined with Batman. But that's for a little bit in the future. Today is about celebration. All of the sidekicks are being welcomed to the Hall of Justice because today is the day that they are no longer treated as or viewed as sidekicks. Today is the day they gain their independence, and today is the day that they stand proud next to the Justice League. Only for that entire notion to all come tumbling down when it's revealed, the Hall of Justice is nothing more than a tourist trap that essentially sits as the Zeta Tube, used for the League to transport themselves to their actual clubhouse, that being the Watchtower. Now, when the team is found out about this due to the fact that Green Arrow kind of let it slip to his sidekick that existed, Roy is relatively pissed and he walks out on everybody. Mind you, Roy is about 17, give or take. He's the oldest of the group, so I can kind of see why he's more upset than everybody else. But for the rest of the League, like, I think Calder is 16, Kid Flash is like 15, and Robin's 13. But that doesn't dissuade them, especially with how Robin has been treated and has had his upbringing. Since he's become a superhero, he's been treated as an equal by Batman. So it's not really surprising that he especially feels slighted and underappreciated, as though his independence doesn't really exist. So of course, when the team hears that there's a fire at Cadmus, the 3 of them decide to go investigate, or at least what is the team for right now. But outside of that, the Independence episode is really spent trying to build a foundation for these 3 characters, and so it does a lot more of Robin's stuff, I would say, earlier on and in the beginning. At least in this episode. Again, this was originally aired as a 2-parter, and a lot more of Robin's cool actions and tactical mindset is shown near the end, whereas for this first episode as it's split up, it's a lot less of that. One thing Robin does a lot in this first season that I felt was desperately lacking from the second is the constant hacking and use of technology on his suit, which I thought was really, really cool and a really cool look for his tech. And I kind of wish that was carried over in the second and further seasons. I know why it couldn't be for Robin, but maybe for some other characters. But all of this leads to the finding of Superboy, clone of Superman, and I have my own video on actually everybody in this room except for Robin. I'm just getting around to him a little late. Maybe I'll link those in the description if I remember to be good at my job. But ultimately, the invasion of Cadmus and search for what was originally just a fire only to find an entire underground nest of xenomorphs and living experiments has led to them unfortunately being captured because, man, Superboy is just absolutely busted. And unfortunately, the team was not only tortured and kidnapped, but humiliated. And I know they're taking the blood, and I almost wish they went somewhere with this little plot thread that they set up, considering this place makes a lot of clones, but that'll never be revisited. Man, this show got away with a lot for being a kid's show on Cartoon Network. Anyways, thankfully, due to Calder rolling a perfect nat 20 on Persuasion, he was ultimately able to get Superboy not only to see the group as friends, but also to help them escape as a team. And of course, Robin was already too busy lockpicking his way out, because of course Batman taught him how to do that.
Finally! Lucky Batman isn't here. He'd have my head for taking so long.
Seriously? That's what you're worried about? The whole league will have our heads after tonight.
It isn't really, though, until the end of the episode that we get to see Robin's tactical genius, something he displays a lot of the times throughout this first season. And in this episode, they are completely outmatched strength-wise, even with a half Kryptonian on their team. So Robin has to devise a plan that is more strategic rather than just upfront brawn. So he literally uses, in one of the only scenes he ever does this, a 3D holographic display in order to show everybody destroying pillars so that they can hopefully drop the entire building on this dude. As well, he sets up perfectly for Calder's water powers. Again, I swear this had a higher production value because it was a two-part special, even though some of the suits are inaccurate, like Kid Flash's suit gets an upgrade later in the show, but that's a side tangent. Either way, it was Robin's ingenuity and quick thinking that ultimately allowed him and the team to succeed against this behemoth. And it was on that day, unlike any other, that the Young Justice Squad was formed, ultimately standing up to not only the Justice League, but the injustices that were held at Cadmus. The team has formed a strong bond, being the initial 4 members, and Robin firmly believes himself to not only be the leader, but the tactical genius behind the team. And who can blame him? Dude was trained by Batman, and he even had the balls to stand up to Batman at the end of the episode to cement the team as being a thing. And I think as far as setup episodes go, it was absolutely wonderful and does a lot to help build the foundation of what Robin is and who he is as a character and how we'll see it play out, even down to his little immaturities. Granted, he's stupidly young. Dude hasn't even really fully hit puberty yet. And it doesn't help that this team is super green, as in this is really the first time they're all going to be working together, especially with the addition of McGann being a 5th member. The team isn't exactly all that well set in stone, no established roles basically, so it's going to be a little bit difficult. It also doesn't help that when the team announces to Roy Harper that they're doing this thing, he basically brushes them off completely and says, "You guys are still just the sidekicks, but in a different role," which affects each member of the team differently. It was almost non-consequential to Wally, that's why I didn't mention it. Calder was slightly hurt, but again, he's very mature, especially for his age of 17, 16. So he's not really too bothered by it. But Robin, I think, takes that sentiment to heart the most, and that is a little bit more important in the following episode. But for this one specifically, it's so obvious the team is green, man, and even the Justice League in a lot of interpretations tend to struggle on their first few missions when they have just recently formed, because nobody is really sure of their role yet. So obviously the team is going to make quite a few mistakes. McGann especially, because in this episode it really just felt like shit on McGann, the episode. She reads minds and it doesn't work, and she tries to help take down the new villain of the week, but is almost entirely ineffective in the fight and almost gets them killed essentially, because unfortunately she believed it should just be Red Tornado training them because she couldn't read his mind, not factoring in that there may be other robots to fight. And unfortunately, that's just how things roll. But Robin, if he is supposed to be the leader and supposed to be in this leadership position, doesn't exactly handle it very well. He kind of just scorns her, just like the rest of the team, but nobody, even Calder, they don't provide any true critical feedback or anything to help McGann better herself as a hero going forward. They all just tell her to get out of the way, and Robin is fairly harsh about that. Now granted, his mentor was probably harsh about those kinds of things. Batman was probably very hard on Robin, and he probably does bring that to his other teammates, because at this point in the show, it's worth noting, Robin idolizes Batman, and he looks up to him as the gold standard of superhero. Everything Robin does in these first few episodes, outside of his usual jokey, demeanor, is almost a mimicry of Batman, especially his combat style, his fighting style, and the way in which he guards his secret identity, with Wally being the only person that knows who Robin actually is. And ultimately, by the end of the episode, things kind of get resolved, and McGann is able to genuinely prove herself as being useful, even if she does some questionable things at the end of the episode.
Don't know how things are done on Mars, but on Earth, we don't execute our captives.
You said you trust me.
And while this episode, I didn't feel like it had a lot for Robin, I feel like it helps set up a few pieces. And I think that's something this show does really well that a lot of other shows don't do as well when they have such a large cast, which is long-term storytelling, especially long-term storytelling with minor things put in place for characters. Roy Harper's appearance in this episode setting the seeds of doubt for these characters, or the fact that Robin is kind of fumbling as a leader right now, but not to a huge extent like we're going to see in the next episode. Which, spoiler, Robin's not a very good leader right now. In the episode directly following this, Robin is all about being the leader. He wants to be just like Batman. Batman's the leader. He was born for this, trained for this. He's ready and he's excited. So when the team gets their first true stealth mission that's sanctioned by the League, Robin immediately jumps to the idea of being the leader, and he's the first to ask, who's got the leadership role on this team?
So who's in charge?
Work that out between you.
And what I find really interesting is that Robin doesn't even consult the team. He just assumes he's in the leadership role without talking to anybody. No collaboration, no nothing. He just assumes he's the leader. From his perspective, I find this kind of fair. With Batman, he never had to explain why he was doing something or why he was taking the lead on something. It's just not something he ever had to do with Batman because their roles were so easily defined. It also doesn't help that his team isn't exactly the most competent group of heroes out there, considering on a stealth mission, Superboy starts by making a gigantic seismic event, but Robin isn't exactly helping the most, because post giving his team a little bit of information and a little bit of direction, he doesn't go anywhere. He literally abandons them. Despite this being a recon mission, he leaves his team behind, which is not exactly something you should do as a leader unless you've already determined that. Again, with Batman is different, but here he's just abandoned everybody, and of course, the second Wally West sees somebody, he immediately thinks, oh, let me go up there and find them. If they had been communicating and talking, perhaps he wouldn't have done this and blown their cover completely. But Robin doesn't see this as a fault of his own in the slightest. Instead, he sees this as a failing on the team, and he goes after Wally because of that. He's upset with Wally for blowing their cover despite the fact that he disappeared and left the entire team on his own. All while completely changing the parameters of the mission without any permission from Batman or his own teammates.
Cobra's hoarding this stuff. We don't leave. Not until I know why.
Until you know why?
This team needs a leader.
And it's you. Dude, you're a 13-year-old kid who ducked out on us without a word.
And you're a mature 15? You blew our cover first chance you got.
And it doesn't help that he is antagonistic, to say the least, throughout the rest of this episode, specifically to Wally for making a mistake. His leadership style is almost akin to throwing a gasoline on a fire to try and put it out. Wally's upset with the style in which he was trying to lead. What does Robin do? Robin just shits on him for the rest of the episode. You see, as a leader, it's never really an issue to provide constructive criticism, but it's the tone and the way in which you do it, especially for the person you're talking to. Some people respond better to that type of stuff than others, and Wally clearly wasn't. But Robin doesn't have the empathy nor the maturity to understand that, at least not in this point in the show. So he's just kind of doing his own thing and just, well, living up to his namesake. And that's pretty indicative of a young Dick Grayson, I feel, especially as teams go, rather than Batman. Because Batman just kind of takes whatever he says and shrugs it off nonchalantly, so he's used to using that. It also doesn't help that he once again abandoned his team so that he could get personal glory in dealing with Cobra, and almost leaving his team to get absolutely squashed by this monster of the week. All of this ultimately culminates in Robin having a complete failure of a mission as a leader, and having to come to terms with the fact that not only did he fail, but his style of leadership and the way he wants to do things simply doesn't work with this team. I know I've beaten the dead horse at this point, it's something the show says, but him and Batman, their style of partnership is far, far different from this team and what this team needs. But at the end of the episode, he is able to recognize this, and I think that shows a lot of personal growth on his end.
Oh, so I'm supposed to hold everyone's hands? Who am I kidding? You should lead us, Calder. You're the only one who can.
Please, I can run circles.
Wally, come on. You know he's the one. We all do.
I personally believe there's a lot to say, not only on a maturity scale, but on a scale of leadership, to be able to look at yourself and to recognize, I'm failing as a leader. Somebody else needs to take my place, perhaps somebody else more qualified at the time, before I can or ever will step into this position again. I think it's a great thing. The self-reflection is a wonderful thing, and something I wish we saw a whole lot more of in real life. And while the rest of the mission doesn't exactly go hitchless, under Calder's leadership, the team is far more put together and doing far better on this mission. They even get to take down Bane, which is something they probably weren't going to do under Robin's leadership. Although they don't catch Cobra, and they never were really supposed to. Again, this was nothing more than a recon mission, so I find it funny they even ended up like this. And best part of it all, Robin's not the leader, so he doesn't have to explain this whole mess to Batman. And while Dick isn't exactly ready to make a good leader, he is still a fairly good teammate, especially throughout the rest of this show. Now, was he a good teammate to Wally in this situation? Probably not, and probably not to Superboy either. But he goes out of his way later in the episode to be a good teammate, to talk to Superboy and to try and explain where Dinah is coming from and how she, and him by extension, are able to take down so many different villains. He's able to empathetically understand what Connor is going through and try to talk him through it, even if it kind of works and kind of doesn't at the same time. Either way, I think it's a really nice note that Robin does this, and we see that alongside his more asshole tendencies. And pivoting off that, one of my personal favorite episodes of the first season, Downtime. We see that Robin takes his training almost religiously, extraordinarily serious, to the point and level of dedication that Batman does. And Bruce, weirdly, spies on him doing this, but probably for good reason, because Robin is always pushing himself to be better and pushing himself to be just like Batman. And Batman to him is perfect. Batman doesn't fail, but Bruce doesn't want this for Dick. He wants Dick to have a real childhood and a life outside of the crime fighting that he so often does, because Bruce didn't have that. He was robbed of it. He wants to give Robin that better life, and that's the way I always prefer Batman to be written, not looking for a successor, but instead looking to fix the broken lives and to, by extension, help fix his own broken life by cutting down on the pain that is seen not only in his own life, but in others. And I think it was a lovely little segment in the episode to just have them stop training and to go play basketball instead. You can call it training all you want, but at the end of the day, that's a father and a son bonding together. And I think it's moments like this where Robin really starts to pick up on the idea that maybe being Batman isn't exactly all it's cracked up to be, because Batman prior to having a Robin wouldn't have done something like that. He would have been more stoic and more serious, unfortunately. It is Robin that will bring that side, that lighter, happier side of Bruce out. The next major episode that I feel like Robin does something innovative is actually a few later, and that's an episode completely personally centered around Artemis, with Robin being more of the side piece in the episode. Robin very quickly discovers that Artemis doesn't actually live anywhere near Green Arrow and isn't Green Arrow's niece. Instead, she lives in Gotham just like him. They go to the same high school now. And so it's not really that big of a surprise that he would know that though, because like, this is Batman's son. Also, first mention of Barbara Gordon and her jealousy, which I find hilarious. But outside of that, not only does Robin and Artemis team up throughout this entire episode, they're also trying to stop a coup plan from basically what is Red Tornado's brother and sister in robotics, and former superheroes themselves. And so the entire premise of the episode is the rest of the team got absolutely swamped after the League left, and their den mother, Red Tornado, was kind of brainwashed into being a villain for a minute. I don't know, it's a video of its own, and I'm only mentioning this so that the plot of this episode doesn't seem completely irrelevant. But this also starts the trend of Artemis nearly drowning for a few episodes straight. Gotta love their deathly running gags. This whole episode serves more as taking Robin a whole lot more serious. Let me preface by saying that. He is definitely cracking jokes and trying to make light of the situation and enjoy his time as best he can. But there are points in the episode where he is dead serious, and he's not playing around. He's been in situations like this since he was 9 years old. He has a lot of practice, something Artemis doesn't, because Artemis spends a lot of this episode absolutely freaking out because she's fairly new to this whole superhero game. And Robin spends a lot of this episode redeeming himself, in my opinion, as a leader, as he proves to have decent leadership skills, as well as in helping calm Artemis throughout the episode. I think it's really well done, and it's my favorite Artemis episode, and part of that is because Robin does such a great job in his role, so I figured I would bring that up.
Trot! We'll get Trot or get dead.
How can you be so calm?
Practice. Been doing this since I was 9.
Robin not only comes up with a tactical plan in order to defeat Red Tornado's evil brother and sister, but is also able to inspire Artemis to do it on her own when he is incapacitated and no longer able to fight. Something that I think speaks volumes to what he'll do in the future, which is far more on the inspiration side rather than the combat side. But that's for later, probably a lot later. It's also worth noting that Robin was the first person to defend Artemis against Wally's relentless attacks in her first appearance episode, pointing out that it was Artemis that actually saved them from Amazo and not Green Arrow. Actually, I'm pretty sure I cut this section from script earlier in the video when I meant to mention it. But yeah, he had made a big fuss about Green Arrow helping with the arrows, but unfortunately that fuss didn't matter because it was Artemis instead when they originally thought it was Speedy. I'm just gonna add this in now. And all of that goes to say that Robin did a fairly decent job at leading, at least in this scenario.
He's breathing too.
Way to get Trot.
And well, in one episode we are shown not only his emotional maturity, but his way in which he helps his teammates the most. We're also shown the fact that, yeah, this dude's still 13 and he's just not ready to be any kind of leader yet. Because in an episode dealing with the idea that the team may or may not have a few moles, all a tip based off of a very unreliable source, let's not pretend like the team would know 100% that the mole was real, even though we, the viewer, know. But Calder was given the information, he wasn't ready to bring it to the team yet, which again is his own decision and I talk about it in his video, but Robin was absolutely pissed. The whole idea and the whole premise, if you remember from the beginning of the video, I know that was like, what, 14 minutes ago? Robin's whole reason for wanting to be on this team was to gain independence, step out of the Bat's shadow a little bit, and allow his autonomy to reign. He wanted to be a leader and to show everyone he could do this. But hiding this mole thing from them, it's like a slap in the face of why the team was created in the first place. It's like saying, we're no better than the people above us who hid secrets from us, and that's why we wanted to split from them. And so Robin and especially Wally were pissed.
The 3 of us started this team because the Justice League was keeping secrets from us.
Or did you forget that, like you forgot to tell us about the mole?
And the rest of the team wasn't so hot because the rest of the team were considered to be the moles, so it wasn't exactly going well for Calder or just about anyone. The team essentially fractured into groups of 2, with Robin, Kid Flash, Artemis, Miss Martian, Superboy going off on his own, and of course Calder and Captain Marvel, the Den Mother for this week, all splitting into groups of 2 except for Superboy because he does whatever he wants. And the team did not do well, like at all. It was actually probably the second most disorganized episode next to the first time they tried to have Robin as leader. And Robin was really the starting point and the catalyst for this whole being upset thing. He was the first one to confront Batman and to tell him, "You're sending us on a wild goose chase mission to avoid from talking about this." He opened the can of worms inadvertently because sometimes I don't think he realizes the kind of influence he has on the team, even if he isn't the leader. He allowed for Calder's judgment to be challenged in a way that's probably not going to look good on him or for the rest of the team in a productive way. It's one thing to challenge him privately and to be confused and to be angry and to be upset, but the way in which he did it so publicly essentially just let everybody else walk over Calder. And because Calder is so nice and a lovable young man, he just kind of let it happen until he took command. But at the end of the episode, not only does Robin finally rationally talk to Calder and understand why he did it, the team is also able to rally around this and again is able to understand why he did it. And it has to be Robin once again who takes that role of extending the olive branch to understand. Because again, I think he has a lot of influence on the team, even if he's not the leader. It's just because, in my opinion, he has the most experience.
I hate to say it, but makes sense.
I am still prepared to step down.
All in favor of keeping Aqualad as leader?
On a more light and fun-hearted note, this show also does take on the idea of Dick being like a mini Casanova, which I find a little wild because he is 13 years old, but you know, I guess it just happened, so I'm not gonna skip over it. I will talk about it. But yeah, I mean, it was a fun episode, especially with Zatanna. We saw it with, obviously, Barbara earlier in this video, but in this entire episode, it's basically Robin trying to rizz up Zatanna, all while they're trying to discover more secrets about Red Tornado, why he went missing, and, you know, why he went kind of crazy. Not a whole lot for me to say, really, on this episode, other than the fact that it was enjoyable, it was fun. Dick and Zatanna have great interactions, although it is a little weird because Zatanna's usually a Batman love interest, but I liked how this show did Zatanna. Please don't ask me if she's getting her own video because I don't know yet. But overall, it was a fun episode and a nice break before we get to one of this season's far more serious and sad episodes.
So, good kidnapping.
Actually, yeah. Best ever.
First of many, I hope.
If my dad doesn't ground me for life.
She's grounded for life!
I have talked about this episode a lot. It has ramifications for just about every character, and is one of the biggest overlaps I have in just about every one of these videos. Obviously, I'm talking about the episode that centers around the Justice League and any superhero organization by and large being completely wiped off the face of the earth by unbeatable aliens. This is nothing more than a training exercise where, the team knows. They knew going into it, it's a mental training exercise to understand failure and how to try and overcome said failure and to persevere even when the odds are invincible, basically. Title card. But it all becomes way too real when Artemis accidentally gets herself killed and McGann's subconscious completely forgets that this is a training exercise, and she goes absolutely ballistic, taking over the mental training from John Jones and making it her own, all while in the same manner, essentially dooming everybody else in the simulation to believe they are actually dead in the real world if they die in here. So with that all being set up, Robin is already under a decent amount of stress, but he doesn't do a whole lot for the first half of the episode. It isn't until they land at the Hall of Justice and discover that not only apparently are they being Zeta beamed and kept in prisons, the heroes that is, which isn't true. Robin points that out on multiple different occasions, but Wally is delusional because RIP his girl. Calder ultimately ends up making the biggest sacrifice he could. Calder didn't treat himself as a leader, rather treating himself as a soldier, because leadership isn't his natural position. And in doing so, he threw his life away in order to make sure the rest of the team got forward. But that left them leaderless, which means Robin has to prematurely step up into the role of leadership, something he's so clearly not ready for. And that's made very apparent in the way in which he decides he wants to deal with these aliens, using Superboy as a decoy so that they can get in behind to the mothership and blow it up.
Superboy, you'll create a distraction.
No! He's offering you as a sacrifice. Aqualad would never do that.
You're right. Aqualad would sacrifice himself. A mistake that just cost us our leader. Superboy is the most likely to be perceived as a threat, motivating the aliens to deploy.
And ultimately, his plan goes horribly. He ends up getting every single one of his teammates except for McGann and Martian Manhunter, what's left of his team, his closest friends at this point in time, he gets them all killed. What kind of psychological effect does that have on you? Even if this was a training exercise, what kind of effect does that have on you? Especially because it feels so real, because it was real to them in the moment. His plan fails completely. Superboy gets beamed to death, and him and Wally quite literally blow up on a sewer slide mission. Hopefully that gets around the check. And just because it was a training exercise, or revealed to be, it doesn't exactly make anything feel better. Taking a side note real quick, this was one of my absolute favorite episodes. This and the next episode that comes after it were absolutely fantastic. I genuinely thought this was really happening, mainly because I was a kid and I watched this, so it's kind of on me, I guess. Speaking of the following episode, I think the previous experience killed any notion of Robin's idealism of Batman. I feel like throughout the majority of this first season, we've been slowly seeing him piece together the idea that maybe he doesn't want to be Batman. He doesn't want to accept the responsibility that comes with being Batman. And it's this episode that truly breaks it wide open, and where he fully admits in one of the show's most iconic scenes that he doesn't want to be Batman anymore. That life isn't for him.
I always wanted, expected to grow up and become him. And the hero bit, I'm still all in. But that thing inside of him, the thing that drives him to sacrifice everything for the sake of his mission, that's not me. I don't want to be the Batman anymore.
This is a reality nearly every Dick Grayson comes to the conclusion of in just about every piece of media he's in. He doesn't want to be Batman. And Bruce sets that up very well himself a lot of the times. He doesn't want Robin to be just like him, because the thing Batman knows, the thing that drives him and the thing that pushes him forward is not something that is healthy nor normal. And as much as his children's lives, especially because he, may or may not have made them crime fighters, they're never going to be truly the most healthy or the most normal, this is at least going to help them live a better life than he did. And Robin is finally starting to recognize that almost over halfway through the show. And I think it's great that we got to see that in real time, and it was hinted at from the start of the show, rather than it just being sprung up on us, for example.
I shouldn't be surprised, since you indoctrinated Robin into crime fighting at the ripe old age of 9.
Robin needed to help bring the men who murdered his family to justice.
So he could turn out like you?
So that he wouldn't.
And with that revelation of his character and that self-realization that Dick has, I think it's very poignant that the next episode for him is all about reconnection and going back to the place where he was born as Robin, essentially. That being the circus in which he used to perform as one of the Flying Graysons. Obviously, he goes under an alias, and technically, this isn't even a sanctioned mission that he's going on. This is a mission he is going on to help his old circus master, and that's something he wants to do for himself. You see, the circus has been traveling to towns and cities as circuses do, but every time they travel, a new place is robbed along the way. So, of course, the police are all up inside of their business, trying to figure out why the traveling circus, everything seems to get robbed. they're blaming the circus master, and things are going awry for him, and Robin wants to step in and help because this place and that person means a lot to him, and he's doing so because it's what he wants to do. He is trying his best to reconnect with his past, and I think that's a fairly important point to the episode. And it's also very poignant that he picks a group of people that are not super close to him, that don't know his backstory. He doesn't bring along Calder, and he doesn't bring along Wally, and that's something Wally is very quick to call him out on. In a piece of media that I just cannot believe I cut out of the Wally video. Why did I let this hit the cutting room floor?
The tornado, you guys are not on a mission. Not an official one anyway.
A friend, Jack Haly.
A circus guy? From your old Flying Grayson days?
Yeah, he's implicated in this global crime spree. Someone in the show's dirty, but I need to prove old Jack's clean or he might lose the circus.
Then why not bring me along? I know your backstory. I know what that circus means to you. It's where you grew up. It's where you lost your...
I left you behind because you know my backstory. I didn't want my best pal questioning my objectivity.
Dude, that's what a best pal's for.
It's a really sweet moment that not only shows how close Dick is to his former circus master and how much trust he has in him, but also just how close he is with Wally, knowing Wally wouldn't let him get his feelings and his emotions too tied up in the mission. But ultimately, Dick did end up being correct, because there is no problem with the circus. As a matter of fact, it is actually with Parasite, one of Superman's more popular villains, and Parasite has spent the entirety of the circus running around not only sapping people for their appearance, but also now sapping the team of their powers and passing them all around a quote-unquote sickness that the circus had, when in reality it was just Parasite taking all of their powers. And while that part's all fine and dandy, I think this really helps Robin get some closure on a previous part of his life. He no longer has to think about his parents and the way things went down, but instead he's finally being able to move on. He's stepping outside of the shadow of Batman, he's stepping outside of the idea of wanting to be Batman going forward, and coming back to the place where it all started for him. I believe is his way of letting go and moving on, while also getting to help one of the few people who was good to him prior to becoming Robin. And I think that was a really great way to kind of end Dick Grayson's character arc through this show, because this is the last most important part of his development. Oh, and he has this absolutely heartwarming moment because he's been undercover this whole time, not being a Grayson, but instead being Dan Danger.
Dick, I'll miss you.
It's Dan Danger.
Son, you've grown. But some things never change. Like the sight of a Grayson on the trapeze. You can't fake that, can't hide it. So, do an old ringmaster one last favor?
Overall, it was a really, really great episode and a great highlight way of ending Dick's character growth throughout the rest of this season. And I personally found it very enjoyable, as this episode does come near like the very end of the first season. There's only like 4 more episodes left. But we also do get a few more gem moments, such as, for example, the entire episode about the 3 quote-unquote moles turning out to be somewhat moles. In that episode, Artemis reveals that her parents have been bad guys essentially her whole life. One retired and reformed, and the rest currently active, something she's been hiding the whole time. But Robin's always known. He just never cared. And I think that was a great thing on his part. When Superboy reveals that he's using patches, Robin's simply okay with that and understanding, even knowing where they come from. I think it's a really great thing for him to show that he has this level of trust. Can't say the same about how he reacts to McGann, but like, let's focus on the positives.
I knew. Hey, I'm a detective, but it never mattered. You aren't your family. You're one of us.
And if all of that doesn't go to show just how far Robin's made it, I think the finale does. It hits the core 3 members of the cast really, really hard when it's revealed that Roy Harper is not only a clone, but has also been the mole the entire time, working off of code words and key phrases that helped activate his moleness. Yeah, we'll go with that. is definitely a devastating bombshell of information to learn, especially because Robin looked up to him so much, because Speedy was like the older brother to them, or sorry, Red Arrow now, was like the older brother to them. And to make things even worse, they find out later in the episode the entire Justice League is compromised by the exact same thing that's got Roy, except instead of mind control and genetic manipulation, it's Starro tech laced with specific technology and demonry, all thanks to Vandal Savage, and of course Clarion the Witch Boy. This episode really serves as the team breaking out and into their own, in a sense that they don't really need the Justice League, considering they were not only able to take out a majority of the League, but also save them from the mind control that Vandal Savage had them under. And I think that's a great way to look at it. I know they explain away that like, they're not all at full strength, which makes sense because these are like a bunch of teenagers and Robin is damn near a child and not even a teenager at this point. But I think it's a great way of showing this team's independence, something that they've been working on since the very first episode and something they've been trained to do. For example, Robin, as I put in that little title slide card, he was made for this, for situations like this. He's been training his whole life for it. And while he has a slightly different outlook on how things are going to get done and how he's going to do it moving forward, at the end of the day, he's putting all of that training to work and he's doing a great job strategizing for the team, as well as being able to take out his own mentor. It's a great episode to wrap up the first season on, as I feel it is uniquely satisfying for Robin specifically, for him to kind of beat the shit out of Batman, which I find to be a little funny. But ultimately, I think this does a wonderful job of portraying Dick Grayson. I think this show did a wonderful job of portraying Dick Grayson in just about every aspect, from his wit and his charm to his slight dickishness, along with his more serious, tactical, and forward-thinking mind. His struggles with leadership, his struggles with wanting to be the Batman. I think this show handled all of this really, really well. And the only thing it really skips out on is the major fallout between him and Batman, because it just wouldn't make sense at this age specifically. And they even played up into the romance part of this as well with him and Zatanna. But we'll get to that more when I talk about the Nightwing video, because, oh my gosh, that tie-in comic, I'm pretty sure most of you guys who are fans of the show have seen that image. This man didn't get around, bruh. But in all, I think this show did a really, really great job, and I think it's the most telling that Dick was a part of the group of people who sat at the Watchtower's head table and talked about the missing heroes. I think it really shows the leadership position he's not only going to take in future seasons, but that he has right now. Okay, with all of that being said, thank you all so much for watching. I don't know how much it's going to pick up when I go over and edit this, but I'm very sick, and I'm just barely getting this video done for this week. I really wanted it to come out way earlier, but allergies are a bitch, so unfortunately, coming out a little bit later than I wanted, but thank you all for the patience, and thank you all for watching. If you made it this far, you want to leave a like, it helps out the channel a lot. You want to leave a dislike, please do, and then leave me some constructive criticism down in the comments, as it helps me to be a better creator for all of you. If you want to sub, it's free. You can always unsub later. If you want to join my Patreon, it's about $1 a month. You not only get access to the Discord, but you get access to each and every one of these videos unedited, meaning you won't be seeing any freeze frames, green screen effects, or anything crazy like that. As well, you can also just support me as a content creator, which that's fine if you want to, and it's completely fine if you don't feel like you have to. And finally, if you are in my $5 or above tier, I will shout out you lovely people at the end of each and every one of my videos. And it's about time that I got around to this, because we're almost like 45 minutes into this video. So without further ado, shout out Oscar, shout out Megan, shout out eSibert13, shout out Gabriel Lafonte, Transgers1, VideoGamer75, Golden Boy 420, Dakota Ross, and Donovan Gomez, and MC Bomb 27. You all are amazing. Hope you all have an absolutely fantastic day.